I would like to welcome everyone to our 2025 May Mental Health Awareness Month series. We are so excited to present our FSAP webinars aimed at promoting mental well-being and fostering a supportive community here at UCSF. Today's webinar is Working Parents, Strategies for Resilience and Avoiding Burnout. We are delighted to welcome our presenter, Dr. Heike Mitchell, for this special webinar. Dr. Mitchell is a champion of workplace well-being with a particular focus on supporting expecting and working parents. Blending psychological expertise with strategic insights into workplace dynamics, she creates practical and science-based solutions that help both individuals and organizations thrive. Dr. Mitchell previously served as a fellow here at UCSF in UCOP's Faculty and Staff Assistance Program and is pleased to return to present this webinar. Dr. Mitchell, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you also for Dr. Dolatabadi from FSAP for inviting me to present this webinar. It's always great to be back at UCSF. And I heard there are folks from the UC Office of the President here as well, so welcome, everybody. Our topic is working parents, and here is the agenda for today. The purpose of the webinar is to see what it means to be a successful working parent nowadays, to explore how common the experiences of stress and exhaustion are for working parents and understand how that can lead to burnout and how to improve well-being of working parents all around. I will present strategies, concrete strategies that you can take with you, 3 each for the personal domain, family domain, and career domain for improving well-being. And at the end, we will review resources internally at UC and also externally available to you. As you probably already know, this is a very complex issue, so I will focus on what is in your control right now. There's many layers. There's the organizational layer, there's the political layer, there's a lot going on, but we'll focus on what's in your control. But we will go beyond the basics. I won't be touching on you need to be getting enough sleep, you need to eat regular meals, do self-care. You've heard that stuff before. I'll be a little bit more concrete. So working parents often describe their life as working the double shift. They have their role as a parent, which is basically 24/7, depending on the age of their children, and they have their shift at work. And a fun piece of information is that counterintuitively, actually, those parents working part-time are actually at the highest risk of burnout. They are knee-deep in both the working life, their parenting life, and everyone thinks they can do it all. But a central point of this presentation today will be that well-being is a social issue. And I will come back to that again and again, because the question is, how can you ever tap out for a moment? Do you have backup? Do you have backup for the backup for the backup? Like how people used to live in community with extended family, neighbors, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins around? Or are you the backstop for everything? If you drop the ball, that's it. That is a recipe for burnout. And the world that we live in nowadays makes it even harder to be well as a working parent. So let's get into it. I do want to make sure I mention there will be hopefully time for Q&A at the end, so you can post questions that come up for you in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll have time to answer some of them at the end. So I chose to represent the topic of this webinar as a scale because essentially what burnout is an imbalance. We have stressors on one side of the scale and resources that lighten the load on the other. And the definition of burnout is really too much stress for too long of a time without the right resources to balance it out. These resources can be external, they can be internal. Nobody's scale is all resources and no stress. That's unrealistic. A little stress can actually be exciting. That's why people ride roller coasters. But we cannot be constantly in crisis mode. We can handle stress for a short period of time when there are enough resources to balance it out. And then we have time to recover in between. Otherwise, everyone eventually will hit their breaking point. So think about it for a minute. What does your scale look like? What comes to mind that would be on each side, on the stressor side? Right? Do you have particular life circumstances? Right? If you are barely scraping by, struggling to put food on the table, that's a major stressor. If you're dealing with health issues, if your children are dealing with health issues, that is a major stressor. If you are at will employed, you could basically get laid off any day. That is a major stressor. But what is on the other side, resource-wise? Do you have close, loving relationships? Do you have a way to recover yourself? Do you have hobbies? Do you have maybe a family member who's always there to step in? Do you have whatever it is that comes to your mind? And for the sake of your own well-being, do you recognize warning signs early that things are piling up, or do they just keep building up and up and up? What do you notice? And if you notice, do you know what to do about it? Because burnout does not happen in just an instant. It's like the metaphor of the frog sitting in the pot and someone turns up the heat. Slowly, 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 it starts to boil over. Or the saying of death by 1,000 paper cuts. So if you keep this in mind with the scale, we'll come back to an activity later on where you can try to be a little bit concrete of how to implement one of the strategies in your own life. Let's look at the sources of stress. Because there's actually a paradox. Those who care, for those who care, it can be too much to bear. Those who care are actually at risk. If you don't care, you don't care about parenting, you're just checked out, you don't care about your work, whatever happens, you're not going to burn out. You need to care to be that invested in the outcome, possibly over-invested in the outcome. The more, the better. Thinking, this is just how things are, I gotta power through, which creates a sense of helplessness. And that kind of stress just seeps into your life, your health, everywhere. Accumulating stress is really a vicious cycle because the more we focus on what's going wrong, what dangers there are, the more stress we feel, and then we try to conserve our resources and withdraw from things that can actually be fun and enjoyable, which then creates more moments of stress and just looking at what goes wrong and on and on and on. So particular for these three buckets, the stress at work often comes from the fact that the ideal worker in our society is someone who does not have caregiving responsibilities, whether that's care for your children or care for your elderly parents or another relative, your spouse. Does your workplace, does your department, your team, your supervisor acknowledge caregiving as part of your life? Or is it viewed as a distraction from being utmost productive? We know that, traditional burnout at work comes from having a higher workload than the time allows to accomplish. It comes from little control making decisions in your work, a lack of recognition and positive feedback, and discrimination, inequality, and the job insecurity that I mentioned earlier. Do you recognize any of that in your current job? Or do you feel like, okay, the work bucket is actually fine? Let's look at the self. Where could the stress come from yourself, for example, through fear of missing out? People who never want to not participate. Stress for yourself can come from an immense fear of judgment, of doing anything wrong. It can also come from the cultural standards, social media, you've all heard about that, which can create the sense of perfectionism. Like, how can these people take their family on this picture perfect vacation? And when we try this, there's an absolute meltdown. Well, it's because they only posted the picture perfect photos. They didn't post the meltdown photos. We'll talk about perfectionism a little later on again in strategies. And sources of stress at home, of course, it seems like there's not enough time in the day. There's chores, there's caregiving, there is preparation and cleanup, and people's needs colliding, schedules, routines. The stress can also come from that feeling, if I don't do it, nobody will. And then having nothing left at the end of the day for who you are as a person outside of being a working parent. Because if you're doing the double shift, working and parenting, time's up. The next day starts over. But where are you in here? Where are the other roles that you used to have before? Because in fact, compared to 50, 100 years ago, our homes are huge compared to back in the day. But our support is tiny. And that is really not a sustainable way. Because we need to get out of the survival mode. If there's a sudden crisis, right, you couldn't see it coming, of course, you'll go in survival mode. Like I said, the stress is actually helpful, help you focus, tunnel vision, what needs to get done. That's perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, but it has to be time limited and not your constant day to day. Are you enduring your life, or are you actually creating a sustainable rhythm? Not living on this kind of crazy autopilot can be a real act of resistance. And unfortunately, this country today, the government stays pretty much out of supporting families compared to much of the rest of the world. Even though we have paid parental leave in California, that's a huge advantage over some of the other states in the US. It's still ridiculously small compared to many other countries in the world, where people get partially paid to be on leave for a year. You may not want to take that much time off, that's fine, but it would be your choice. And there's subsidized childcare, yada, yada, yada. You might have heard of this. So really a big picture question that we won't have time today is, who benefits from me being burned out, overextended? So even though the world is sometimes feeling like crazy, unpredictable, scary, we can vote. We have some control over that, but let's focus on what's in your inner circle of control of improving your well-being as a working parent. So I put well-being here on the spectrum. On the left in green is that outmost well-being, and then it declines as we move along to the other end of burnout. And we can look at these signs and consider yourself today. How often does each of these signs and symptoms apply to you? Look at both columns. Do you experience these never, maybe once a month, maybe once a week, maybe every day? That kind of paints a picture for where you're at. And I actually have a link in the resources that you will get for an online questionnaire you could complete that has these symptoms in questions for you to rate, and then comes out with how burned out are you as a parent? Because well-being really means you feel rewarded, whether that's a paycheck at work or positive feedback or an emotional connection. It means you have time to restore yourself, your emotions, in addition to getting enough sleep. It means you feel supported and like you belong. You have other roles than just being a working parent. You're a friend, you're a community member, maybe you're in a religion, you volunteer. Decent work supports good mental health. Um, but here's how burnout shows up. It's exhaustion that sleeping will never fix. It's a irritability. It's not actually feeling like you're good at what you do and not enjoying it. Having worse health problems or new problems. It's having escape fantasies like, oh, if I could just disappear for a day. It's or drinking alcohol, using substances, being online, watching TV nonstop, just to get out of your own head. And this is in contrast to your true self. Like nobody says their ideal life consists of scrolling social media all day or snapping at their coworkers or their kids. And that can get really heavy because that's not who you are or who you want to be. And worst case is when absolutely everything feels like a chore, you feel numb, and it ends up in disengagement from work, disengagement from people you actually care about, where parents actually no longer really react to their kids' needs. They just tune them out. That's why this really, really matters. That's why you matter, and that's why this matters for a whole society. Because having an emotionally distant parent is not a great way to build emotionally strong children. I'll give you one example. Feeling delighted to see your children, like the sparkle in your eye, the smile on your face, when you're reunited with them, whether it's been an hour or a day or a week, that is a strong predictor of your kids' well-being and confidence in the future. It's not being delighted in everything they do and all the annoying stuff they do. That's not it. But it's being delighted in reuniting with them, in connecting with them, and showing them that they're not just an obligation or a task to be managed, but it really builds their worth as a person. So let's look at the relationship between work burnout, parental burnout, and people often ask about depression. How does this fit in the picture? So burnout is always context specific. Job burnout, we already talked about. Parental burnout, if you don't have kids, you're not caretaking of any kids, then that doesn't apply. Research actually shows that in the US, 33% of parents scored high enough to be considered burned out. 33, that's a third of all parents. For example, they answered yes to questions like, I'm so tired out by my role as a parent that the sleeping doesn't seem like enough. I feel like I can't take anymore. I feel like I'm looking after my children on autopilot. I do what I'm supposed to do, but that's it. I'm no longer able to show my children how much I love them. And you might not be surprised by this, the more individualistic countries like the US, Canada, Western Europe, they present with higher levels of stress and higher risk of parental burnout than more collectivistic countries like South America, Colombia, Pakistan, or China. And these cultural values are actually more important than factors as income level or the number of children. The more independent and individualistic you were before becoming a parent, the bigger the shock to the system. Like I said, we all used to have more collectivistic cultures. Over time, and the US is really at the tip there, it's become so individualistic that it makes parental burnout so much more likely. And if you have both a really demanding, emotionally demanding job and you have really emotionally demanding kids, you can have both types of burnout at the same time, like a double whammy. And then in relation to depression, that is a clinical diagnosis. So that seeps through your whole life. Everything seems terrible. Everyone is terrible. There's no hope for a better future. Even if you were to quit your job and your kids moved out of the house, that wouldn't fix depression. Whereas in burnout, stepping away from that context of work or parenting would improve the burnout. But there are effective treatments for all of them, for depression as well as for burnout, if you could find someone who specializes in that. And the bottom line of what I put here on the slide is that you are not a robot. You cannot power your way through depression or burnout. The saying, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, that's a myth straight out of cowboy movies. Or if you chose to have kids, you're supposed to love every second of it. That's unrealistic. So after this review, I'm going to lighten the mood a little bit, I hope. I don't think I will ever meet a parent caretaker who does not laugh out loud when they see the title of this book. And you can, if you are so inclined, find a 5-minute version of this read by Samuel L. Jackson on YouTube, adults only, of course. Because there can be a lot of shame when talking about parental burnout. But shame is silent, and that puts another layer on the isolation and repeats the expectations that those planning families or new parents have, unrealistic expectations. Because if nobody talks about it, how would they know? The reality is that parenting elicits all of the difficult emotions, all the difficult emotions you've been trying to avoid and get rid of, they will come out. You'll get angry, you'll get annoyed and bored and sad and despairing, and you will feel guilty and powerless. Your kids will bring that out. How do you deal with that? And you can love your children deeply and be grateful for them and delight in reuniting with them. And on the other hand, experience all of these difficult emotions. It does not rule each other out. It does not make you a bad parent if you get annoyed. If, like my child, repeats the same questions 30 times over, I have to manage that and not scream at him because it is not his fault. This is how his brain currently works. So let's move into the strategies. How do we avoid the death by 1,000 paper cuts and build sustainable well-being? So in the research on well-being, like I said in the beginning, we see the same conclusion. High quality relationships with spouses, family members, friends, colleagues, built on trust, are what predicts well-being. It's not fame and fortune and achievement. Of course, you need a basic level of stability and food security and income to live. But beyond that, it's relationships, because loneliness is toxic. And you can be lonely even when you're not alone. So let's work on building your well-being strategy. And I'm using the word build intentionally because you need to put the pieces in the right place at the right time and not just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Your life circumstances are unique, and I hope one of these strategies at least will spark something and you'll give it a try. So we'll look both at internal and external factors for tipping the scale towards well-being. There's a ton of organizational strategies, of course, for job burnout and preventing that, but that's a whole nother webinar. So here are the strategies that I'll focus on today. Those are in your control at work, at home, and for yourself. And if you want to put notes down, please do, because I don't want these to just go in one ear and out the other. And I'm doubting you showed up here today to just waste your time. So maybe open an email and take notes, email it to yourself or in your phone, whatever works for you. And like I said, you will also get an email from FSAP afterwards with these in a handout. So let's go through them one by one. Start with the career strategies. You see communication, buffers, and goal setting. Most of the time, communication means practicing clear, non-defensive conversations at work, like having some kind of acronym describing the context, the event, the impact. But what I'm referring to here is actually communication as community building, which means watch out for your assumptions, the assumptions you make about other people at work, because it may seem like everybody else is making it work. Working parents, how do they do it? And I can't. But that's a false assumption. If everything was that easy, I wouldn't be doing this webinar. I would be out of a job. We wouldn't have FSAP. You wouldn't need any of these services. But that's not the reality. People are trying to live up to that ideal of the perfect worker and the perfect parent. And most don't share their struggles because it will seem like a personal failure. Connection to individualistic societies. If something goes wrong, it must be your personal failure. Instead of looking at the big picture, the stress building up over time, the lack of resources. I'll guarantee you at a large institution like UC, you are not the only one going through any particular life situation. I encourage you to talk about it. Of course, talk about it in a professional way. For example, join an employee resource group. Propose one specifically for working parents. Let's improve the workplace relationships. Foster strong, supportive relationships with colleagues, supervisors, because ultimately, your success at work also depends on the quality of relationship that you build. And you are paving the way for future people joining the organization. That was communication. Next is the strategy of creating buffers. Those are mini resets between tasks at work. Are you able, when you start to get into a frenzy, to take 1 minute to center yourself, figure out what you want to do next? Or are you just reacting left and right? Remember, you are not a robot. You can schedule meetings for 50 minutes instead of the full hour. Please eat your lunch, refill your water bottle, take bathroom breaks. If you commute by car, sit in the car before you get out. for 30 seconds. Or where you got home, you turn the car off, you sit there for 30 seconds and let your body recover from the stress of the day. Breathe and take your vacation days. Don't skip these things to save time. That's what anxiety and stress tells us. We have to keep going, go, 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 go. But really, it will come around and bite you in your stress response, in your health, in your insomnia. I know this might not be possible for every job if you're running a code in the emergency department, right? You can't just check out and go refill your water bottle. So think about what this looks like for your life and your day. Is it before work, after work? Is it in between? Everybody has vacation days at UC. I know that much. Take them. So after communication and buffers, we have goal setting. Being honest with yourself in your career development, setting realistic goals, recognizing your limits. Focus on what truly matters in your career progression in this phase. Like I said, people who burn out are the ones who care. They care about their job, their coworkers, their careers. There is this concept of the motherhood penalty. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's an assumption that mothers don't need to be supported in their career development because they are less available and dedicated after having kids. And then the fathers, on the end, are so much more responsible and committed just because they fathered a child. So that feeds the cycle of self-fulfilling prophecies, even though we know that these are just stereotypes. So to work through these, do you have mentorship in the workplace to bounce ideas off, get support? Do you have a career plan for the next 5, 15, 25 years when your kids have moved out? There are really fantastic results of structured career support programs for working parents, especially at universities across the country. If anybody's interested, let me know. I'd love talking about those. So those were the 3 career strategies that I want to get on today. Let's move to the family life strategies. Earlier, we talked about delight. But of course, you can't just create that out of nowhere. You can't make yourself feel delight. The opposite of being emotionally distant is sharing joyful moments. So this means joyful for all, not just one person. Just because your kid wants to play with Lego and Barbies, if you hate that, that's not a joyful moment. It has to be genuine enjoyment for all involved in a stress-free context that creates these in-sync emotions and builds positive relationships. So what do you actually enjoy doing with your children? And what do they enjoy doing with you? And the simpler, the better. Which brings us to choosing your battles. Because if joyful moments in your family mean you're watching a movie together, then please stop fretting over screen time. If joyful moments happen when you go to a fast food restaurant that has a fun play structure, don't worry about the nutritional value of the meal. The end justifies the meals. It's all about frequency. So as long as it's not every day, it's perfectly fine to throw out those rigid rules and have fun for the sake of connecting with the people you love. If you have a kid in travel sports, it means you can't eat dinner together and you have no time to connect with them emotionally. It's just stress, stress, stress. Then take them out. Losing out on this college sports scholarship is a better result than losing the delight in your family life because you cannot make up that time. And choosing your battles also relates to interacting with your partner if you have one or other family members. So let them do things imperfectly as long as nobody gets hurt so that you can participate in other things. You could call a friend or family member or hang out with them or go on a date together. Find joyful moments for yourself. What did you used to do to fill your cup? And there's a whole battle over parental leave and having the person who gives birth not take the only one taking the parental leave, but have the other person take leave by themselves to get into the caretaking mode. That pays off big time. So, do you feel confident in choosing your battles to focus on what actually matters? And to go into the last point here is kids are better off when their parents are not the only adults in their lives who they have connections with. Because let's let's conceptualize the support network as being for the children. Most families have this bare bones setup that I talked about earlier. Maybe they have one backup, but what if that backup is unavailable, or they have kids themselves? It's totally unpredictable. Relying only on the nuclear family, maybe daycare and school, that's chronic creates stress when things fall through the cracks. Where can you build the trust to have your kids interact with other folks, extended family members, neighbors, friends, hired help, babysitters? I know that can be scary, but you burning out is worse. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? There you can have safeguards in place. But let's move into the last bucket of strategies, which is maybe you're standing in your own way. So, how well developed are your stress management and emotion regulation skills? Do you know your physical, mental, behavioral signs? Can you recognize them? Can you be present focused, not just rehashing the past or worrying about the future? That will pay off big time, improving your stress management and emotion regulation skills. The second one is, do you have regular time for rest and restoration, which means you are awake? This is in addition to sleep. This is time for leisure, hobbies, joyful activities for yourself. Like I said, these other roles, friendships. What would need to be different in your life to make room for these? Who would need to step up, step in? And the last one here is the good enough parent. There are ways to cultivate a good enough perspective to increasing your self-compassion, understanding the context with tolerance and kindness, like you were towards a friend. Because at the end of the day, everybody is imperfect. And that's not such a bad thing, especially modeling that for your kids. Um, Culturally, that's a challenging concept, especially with social media. There's positive parenting campaigns, right? Healthy eating, academic success, and fostering the best social skills. But maybe we should all post some photos of this is the mediocre birthday cake I made. It didn't taste that great. Or here's the photo from our really not enjoyable vacation. That would be real. And often, your own way of how you were parented comes out here. So if you want to work on that more, find yourself a good therapist, get support to work through that and chart a different way for the future. So I'm going to look at the time. Of course, it always runs over time. So like I said, you'll get this in an email with the strategies, but I would like you to pick one of these and figure out, how can I give this a try? Right? How can I tip the scale? Where would I get the most bang for my buck? Pick one, or pick one out of each category, depending how you feel. Say which one, write down which one you want to try, and then define when. when would this fit into my routine? Like a friend of mine just told me this. She has a toddler, and she said when she drives her car somewhere with the toddler in the back who's buckled in, right, can't get out, and they get to their destination, she gets out of the car and walks around the car to the door where the child is buckled in, ever so slowly. She savors that moment. The kid doesn't even notice. But she takes a breath and she extends this pause. The doors are shut. She doesn't hear this kid scream just for 10 seconds to give herself a break. And then the last step in trying one of these strategies is how do you overcome the predictable obstacles? Like, if it was this easy, if there were no obstacles, you would already be doing all of this. And that's when it can get tricky. So that's when you might need some resources. So I'm going to jump into that. And like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them in a minute. I love this statement that Postpartum Support International, which is a nonprofit organization, puts out. First, remember, you are not alone. This is a vital message because so many working parents feel isolated. Sharing your experiences and connecting with others is key. Second, you are not to blame. It's important that you understand these feelings of struggles are common and they are not a reflection of your worth as a parent, as a working parent. And the last one is with help, you will be well. We'll get into the resources. Tiffany will talk about FSAP. Do reach out. I'll promise you that time will pay off in its multiplicity. So I compiled this resource list. There's some, I know you can't click on the links, but you will be able to when you get that PDF sent out. There's some within UC support. There is some, parenting books and lists and online groups and some very non-scientific online tests. One is called, Do I Need Therapy? There's official lists of parent-child interaction therapists if you want to work on that. So do look that over and do reach out.